Right, so my name's Chris Speed. I'm a professor in design informatics at the University of Edinburgh College of Art. So really, our premise, or the design space I work in, is reconciling the gap between data, which you are streaming off you, pouring off you, but you can't see it. Sometimes you'll be receiving buzzers in your pockets, but you'll keep that to yourselves probably. And the world, and how we then change our relationship with the world. And in particular, a project which is called it's the Encounter, Time of the Encounter project. And just a small part of this, it's AHRC-funded Connected Communities project, and a bunch of universities, but particularly a couple of schools, the Holmwood School in London, and also the North Queensferry Primary School in North Queensferry, funnily enough, in Fife. And really dealing with a particular space in which data and self and the world are really quite confusing for children. And this is actually based on an inquiry about the time, temporality, and understanding temporality in the time of the world and time of the soul, as Paul Ricoeur set up when he reflected on St. Augustine's letters to God. And the principle is that St. Augustine is a bit caught. This is this crisis that we all face, that some of the time you're in a temporal space of self. You're feeling hungry. You're feeling the need to ring your mum or your dad or whoever. And other times, time is then connected to the world, which is the clock. And St. Augustine, well, Ricoeur felt that there was a particular moment in St. Augustine's letters as he's trying to reconcile this time, your time, and then grand narratives. Now, the thing is, I think what we've found through into the 21st century, that the binary relationship between the soul and the world is being supplemented by data and the time of data. Time of data travels at extraordinary speeds that you can't imagine. That's part of the core of some of our research, that it's inconceivable. And we might have anthropomorphized kind of God-type structures, and we can imagine and we can put time onto those. We even do it with dogs and say that dogs live for 70 years if I times 15 by whatever amount. So we can begin to understand time, but the speed of data is inconceivable. This is 2010, when these three gentlemen are faced with the fact that two dueling algorithms. So stockbrokers have written two algorithms, pieces of code, which will sell and buy shares for a certain company, just according to certain conditions of the market. So you should leave them to do their thing, and they're programmed to, they're gamed. Either like, you can't win at gambling, you can't beat the house always wins. Well, if you write these algorithms in the right way, they will trade across the planet at incredibly fast speed across fibre optics and gain and get you a better space. The problem is on the May the 6th, two of these algorithms got themselves into such a contest that they sold $4 billion worth of shares in 2.5 minutes, because the dueling process dropped and it sold, and it was a fire sale in the terms of code. Now, there was an error in the way the code had been written, but nevertheless, $4 million was shifted. And the only thing that those guys can do is pull the plugs out. They can't exit, they can't run any executables in the time, they can't kill the code. They just have to pull the plugs out, which is a highly material practice. So very interesting, this idea that increasingly the time of the world is no longer a conversation with us and some other being of a higher force. It's actually increasingly about understanding our relationship with data and keeping up or keeping down and getting off grids and so on and so forth. So when we then was approached with the context of kids, I mean, and you're probably aware of Barbara Adams' study of schooling and time, is that time in children is very, very complicated. Pulling up a reference from Paul Thrift, you might say that kids are largely temporally innocent. I've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and at various points in their life, they couldn't tell the time. They're both getting pretty good at it now, but prior to that, it could have been anything. I could have said that it was Christmas in 4 weeks' time, at any time in the year. And on a daily basis, they have to check with me, or they used to, is it the weekend? Is it school today? What's going on today? And highly open. And of course, part of schooling is about building a connection to the time of the world through the bell and all those 19th century tricks, which still haven't really gone away. So there is a terrific amount of innocence. So intervening in that space was quite a fascinating opportunity. Part of the team were philosophers, and they wanted to perhaps understand how a designer like me can interrupt and disrupt this and perhaps begin to develop technologies for change. So we'll come on to the robots in a wee bit, or technology of reflection. And a narrative I have that deals with children and time is that if you look at the representation of kids in horror movies or thrillers or anything that deals with supernatural, is that they're used particularly at a certain innocent age when they become mediums. And you'll be aware of Cole from Sixth Sense, perhaps, or Carol Ann from Poltergeist. They're used critically throughout horror as this gateway, this space in which that innocence detaches themselves from the time of the world. So they can be the ones at night when they're running around. And let's be honest, the only things that kids are a problem with is sleep, because they just don't sleep when you need them to. So when approaching Holmwood School, it was a very interesting opportunity. Now, we work with the Holmwood School and North Queensferry Primary, and Holmwood describes itself as a school for international and local children with high-function autism, Asperger's syndrome, language, communication, social pragmatic difficulties, and those associated with ADHD and specific learning difficulties. It's a great school, great team. There's practically more staff than there are kids. There's 19 students, and there's about 24 staff. So a highly cared for environment, but really fantastic. Now, the question was, how do you begin to explore concepts of time in amongst this particular group of students who have very complicated models of time and relations, but also with the young who are just beginning to learn time? Well, another sideways slant is begin to understand that your relationship with data in the world is broken. It isn't Facebook, data isn't Facebook. It's very hard to understand what data is. And I'm going to play you a short scene that I use as what I think you're going to see at the back, because we're going to do some playful stuff in a wee bit. And I was trying to think, how do I set up what our intervention was? And our intervention has been robots. So, my reference for this is this extraordinary sequence of events that happened in 1986, which was the explosion of Challenger. Now, I was on the school bus in 1986 going home, and it was already mediating out of time that something had happened. But when you consider it in real time, with a mix of quantitative data that NASA are pushing out, something to do with 104% maximum dynamic pressure, something to do with the guys and the gals in the shuttle, throttle up Roger, feel that mother go, woohoo! And then NASA, 35,000 going through 1.5, how do they relate to each other? Moving through all the way to, yep, I've got to, Roger, go at throttle up, 104%, uh-oh, that's a human, that is, and loss of all data. You get this very interesting conundrum, rather like, I think, is what we're faced as individuals when we're dealing with where is data, where is the world, and where am I in this? If we watch how this plays out in reality, you can listen to NASA watch, and there's a guy watching data. And he's just watching a screen as sensors pour data to him. Meanwhile,
throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go with throttle. 1 minute 15 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
12 seconds after it had visually exploded, the guy was still reading out data. So the sensors were working. So for all intensive purposes, the shuttle was doing, it might have been getting hot, but keep reading the data. And then what do we think happens? Someone taps him on the shoulder or her on the shoulder and says, don't look at that data, look at that data. And that's this perpetual gap which we will keep finding ourselves in. So the intervention into the school then was to try and find a piece of technology or a process through technology that would really disrupt but open up concepts of data, which I'll reveal when we start asking the students to document and do some counting, if you like, and then use an instrument, which is these robots, that perhaps open up an opportunity for reflection. And we did it in 3 ways, or 3 stages. The first one was to ask the students to talk about their time, or in this context, my time. What is my time, as far as you're concerned? Then, which is perhaps the individual in the classroom. Then our time, the group of 15 students in the room. And then concepts of speed, acceleration, and how that time might feel like. Some of you might have had a kick of coffee, so time might be feeling faster. Some of you might be just ready to go home. So the first one, my time. Well, the first thing that designers often do these days is develop probes. We call them design probes, strange words. But to better understand the things that we make in the end, what we do is start to understand the system. But we made these design probes very highly participatory. We gave kids disposable cameras, those old Polaroid, well, those old film ones, and we gave them an IKEA clock. And we asked them to take photographs of their world, a day in their life, with the clock featuring in every photograph, which is quite odd, because suddenly you realise, if you look at all your family snaps, there aren't many clocks in them. I mean, there might be at train stations or in the background in mantelpieces, but there really aren't. So when we began to get the feedback back, you had these really interesting results. I won't show you many, but there's just a few of these. And they tend to show social things. They'll tell you what they're doing. So at about 12:20, we don't know if that's a lunchtime or not, but you begin to get this social. Other times we do get information about they're in classrooms and they're working. Other times you get, again, social connections, you get relationship with the teachers and the bells, and you get lunch times. And very quickly, if you 15 or 19 children times 24, you get a lot of photographs quite quickly. So what we began to do then, and this is shifting into part 2, is we asked them to come back, we bring them back to the school, and we spread them, ask the students, here you go, here's 300 photographs, could you arrange them according to order and time in the hall? So the students then construct this huge timeline into which their individual lines, we'll ask them to reflect on this in a little packet, then suddenly into a big group one. So you give everyone each their 20 pictures and say, right, go place it into a day. And as you can imagine, very quickly, you begin to get, second stage is the segue, into our time. So you begin to see this huge timeline from breakfast time all the way through the day, all the way around to evening time, when you begin to see, obviously, darkness, and you see people beginning to go to bed in pyjamas and things. So there's a fantastic portrayal. And at that moment, you begin to get a tipping point from individual into our time. But the fun thing that we began to do then was introduce the printer clock. So it worked. I think the students were talking about, oh, you have lunch later than we do. Yeah, we've got karate on Saturday mornings, so we have to get through karate, and then we're all starving, and then we get home. Oh, we don't. We just lay around in pyjamas watching telly, eating. So you get these really interesting conversations. The next thing we did, though, is Larissa, who the PhD student I should have mentioned, has digitised all of those photographs with their time. So already they've become data. And she's put them in a database in this clock. And what happens in the printer clock, which we then take back to the school, is that when you pull the cord on the grandfather clock, it checks the time, the real time, and then it pulls a picture that was taken around that time from the database. So what was beginning to happen was that the technology allowed them to pull the clock and find out, even to this day, they can still print this thing, gets through paper, and they find out that, hey, it was Maggie. This is what you do at this time. Again, disrupting this idea that time is something industrial out there, that the school decide what happens, and actually it's something that we are part of. We made that clock. So that was a second part of that kind of conversation of our time. But this was a little bit like a design intervention that we impose, and the best thing they do is pull it, and it's great fun. It's very unusual printing a clock, because it's really good when someone says, what's the time, for about a minute, and then the picture's redundant. But because you're connected to that community, you never want to give it away. There's a very odd, you walk around with this, yeah, I knew what the time was. It was really special, and it's useless in one sense, but also very powerful in the next. So then we move to the speed of the time, speed of the school. How do we move the conversation from individual into group, and then into the fact that, well, let's be honest, some of you are falling asleep and some of you are quite engaged. So how do you talk about that in a class which has got a lot of chemicals going on, from kids getting high, they're eating chocolates and eating coffee or whatever they do, and just home life, how that impacts on them. So we began to then, and there's a few conceits in here, and I think, to be honest, as designers, And as a theorist reading around time, it's a first run. So forgive if you see errors. I'll highlight some of them. I don't think, for example, what we began to do is introduced a timeline. And that's what I didn't like. Actually, this could have been, I don't think kids have timelines. So this was an error. But this is part of design, a reflective process. So we gave them a timeline, and we asked them very simply, across 5 blocks, which is bigger. Is that bigger? 5 blocks in a day, from 7 o'clock, early morning to mid-morning, lunch-ish up to 4, end of school, 6 p.m. to, 4 p.m. to 7 and 10. So quite crude, really. And in fact, we didn't mind if the kids wanted to expand or contract those. And that's when we realised how stupid it is to give them a timeline. It could have been curves, couldn't it? It would have been really nice to see them do this through curves. But in all they would do, we asked them to have fast, medium or slow. Just got those frames. That's how do you feel? And we ran through conversations, really. So this is incredibly slow in the morning. It just doesn't move, largely because the bathroom gets occupied by my brothers or my sisters. Or other people, we've got to go. Mum and Dad, Mum's off to work, Dad's like, we've got to flash out of that house, and we're in breakfast club by 8:15. And there's a real sense of urgency in some of these kids' lives. So they fill this in through a kind of a conversation with ourselves and the teachers, very collaborative. And then at this point, what we've done then is introduced a robot to them. And this is a time bot. And obviously what we've done is given it to them. So we've asked them to do some programming. That's what they've done there. They don't know that yet, but they've done some programming. And what we introduced then is this idea that, let's take your day and let's program it onto something else so that we can watch it. And then we might see and reflect on this. And this is all a little bit, again, reference to the space shuttle. By putting something out there through data and programming, how can you begin to develop a reflexive conversation? And then if we do that with everyone in the class, perhaps we can let all the robots go and we can watch the class. And maybe we'll see that Billy the Whiz is the Whiz and that someone isn't. So that's the thesis anyway. In reality, you'll see there's lots of flaws in this. So we give them this, and we felt it's very important that they get to personalise these things, that sense of ownership. So you'll see over there, they all put brains in them for some reason. The first thing is take the lid off and put a brain in. We didn't plan it for that at all. It was just a space for creation, really. Give them colours, and they pick colours, and then they get black pen and scribble over it. This isn't one it's okay. There's some very interesting, colourful ones at the back there. But what they do then is they then take their programming sheet, and let me just move through this. So, and they're doing what they want. Again, you can see brains popping up everywhere. Which seems to be, again, a critical part of understanding perhaps where data is in this, that they are anthropomorphizing these things very, very quickly. Then they program them. So this is, I just explained this because you might want to go at this. At the moment, they've got the memory of the last class that programmed them. Okay, so we can get them going. But if you want to have a go at programming, all the kids do is then look at their programming sheet, which is here, and then they flip them on, he says, hoping it works. This one didn't fly very well. Oh, there it goes. And along the bottom, along the top, you decide which time you want to tag. So I think the principle is you should do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, oh dear, that's all the batteries are all going a bit. And then you would put the medium on, and in theory, is it going to work? Again, this one really is, that's why it's just starting to flash in a medium pulse. I don't know if you can see that. But that's programming it. That's now the memory remembers it's a medium. In a second time block, it'll be a medium speed. So the students do this, and there's this lovely idea that, again, that then code, and for me, the space shuttle moment is beginning to be a conversation in education. I'm not an educationist. I'm not sure it's really occurring cognitively, but this is a moment where we're beginning to reconcile that gap between the data and the experience. And and they go through it and they program it all up, and then we reach the end. And these are just some Vine clips, really, when you begin to see, Eric, we have problems, and they're incredibly engaging, because they'd simply the chance to get your own R2-D2 and code it and fly is irresistible for kids. So it's in truth, what I was studying and what I'm exploring is this space between design and data. So for me, it was very engaging. Therefore, there's something about, and in the interviews afterwards, quite pleased with the way that the students could talk about themselves through the robot. Whether it actually, as a teaching, I mean, the teacher was very supportive in each context, but actually, whether the kids have extended any models of time is tricky, because the national curriculum seems to lend it toward a universal model of time, time of the world. So in some ways, I think we were dismantling half of those things, but that's what artists do, isn't it? So, so that's the setup for it, really. So what we'll do now is live demo, and like every good live demo, you can see in the background, they can go wrong. So we'll go to the back, and I'll just show you. So I've got your attention now. So what I've done on the windows, I've put all of the programming units, okay? And inside the pen, we've got a bunch of robots. And when I turn, and this is the switch, this is the on-off switch. So at the moment, it's on, right? It's not doing anything because this is the on-off switch. It's in listening mode, so it's trying to be programmed. If I put it on, the on-off switch straight away turns the wheels on. And it's going to move through. One, it's fast, it's fast. It's gone right down to slow. Gone fast again, and I forget what the medium might be, because it might have been one of those, might be medium. So, and that will then cycle back all the way back to 1. So it is an accelerated day. Something the kids wanted was make it a faster day, please. So we did speed it up. So that's all that happened. So you have to be a little bit aware of this. Do please handle them. They're fine. They won't bite. They've got an on-off switch at the bottom. So the critical thing is that this will fall off. Right? That's just supposed to fall off, but it's really tricky. Most people pick it up and then are surprised it falls off. So pick it up by the body and then hold that. Whoops, see, it's all over the place. And then what you'll find at the moment is there's a button on the bottom which you just need to flick on. So what I'd like you to do, I think, if you want to take part, is flick them on and let's watch the ghost of the school, because there's 12 children there, all right? And then you're going to see a classroom move around. It should look a bit like break time. So we'll turn them on and then spin around. And then after 5 minutes, if you're ready and you want to go, just pick one up, turn it off, take that off and put that somewhere semi-safe, and then go over to the windows and turn it back on. And you'll see the 3 flashes or the 4 flashes. And then what you really should do is go to number 1. I've got number 2. And then, so go to a time frame. I think you should start at 1, but maybe it won't matter because it seems to be working. Then decide what you are at roughly that time of day, and then put that on. And that's, once it starts flashing, is it flashing? Yeah, it's flashing. It's kind of doing a slow, medium pulse. That means it's coded, okay, so that time slot. And then you can do all 5. I think each slot has got a code. So if you don't do number 4, for example, it'll remember what the kids had at 4. And then just put your lid back on, and it'll go, okay? And then throw it back in, okay? And if you, you don't have to do this, but if you're struggling, this is where I'm treating like 7-year-olds. If you want, these are the timesheets that we use. We ran through this, and we would ask, this is for the teachers, an ideas pack for the teachers, and it just helped us frame the kids. So if you want to program your bot thinking about your day, and you need a piece of paper to do that, which I think is part of the data problem, then feel free, and there's loads of sheets at the back. Right, go and get a bot then, turn it on. And remember those tops will try and fall off. And I can just, yeah, you're all 7-year-olds now, so I can just take photos. We've got consent, haven't we, Kerry? So I'll be honest, we did it in school halls, which have got, what have they got? They've got plastic floors or vinyl floors. So they fly along. And we've never really done it on carpet, but, and help them out if they get stuck. They should have sensors on the front. Yeah. And some of them get tied up with their own string, so yeah. sorry.
It's just bashing its head.
Is that one working? That's right, yeah, it's probably just... That's it, and flick it on. There you go, and that'll start going any second.
Look at my baby.
So, yeah, there are lots of design problems. Mark 1s, they can hit each other so fast they'll batter their heads off. Now, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's funny how it's kept the thing on. Oh, of course. So at this point, what happened in the classroom was the teacher did his and her very best, while you've got, 12, 15 kids who are quite high on robots, to try and begin to reflect on, look at your bot, think about it, how it's operating in its time space, and think about how colleagues, think about your best friend in the class and how they might be slow at the same time as you, or fast. In reality, again, there's lots of errors in this because you started them at different times, so we can't really compare mornings together. So it's all, many of the students came back to us and said it would have been easier if we'd had a starting line and we'd had it in a straight line and we just raced. And we'd have each reached the end of the day at different times. So again, there's lots of ways to go back to the drawing board and rethink how that works. And it's funny how they do start clustering.
Very sociable then.
Yeah, so, but that's a nice dimension, that you did get these odd reflexive moments. They were quite keen, and they did become creatures, and they did become themselves to an extent. Right, if you want to have a go at programming, so that was the class of 2013. Let's do the class of 2013 in June, so feel free to grab one. Again, they're very delicate. They tend to fall apart, so you take your lid off, you put your lid somewhere, and then you're the top, assuming that you're... I wonder what's happening. It looks like a wheel thing, actually. Whoa. That's interesting, yeah. They are, I'll be honest, they're not great robots, and the batteries go flat within... So yeah, literally, they really power down. So I think what's happened is one of the cogs on the wheel is not running. So it's doing what it wants. It's doing the slow, but then it's doing it in, unfortunately, a pirouette.
Were they built especially for this purpose?
Yeah, it's quite, and actually to do one design prototype's fine, but actually building 12 or 15 and keeping them the same is really hard work. And of course, nothing is built for kids. I mean, you realise how hard Tomy must work, or Mattel must work. Whoops. Oh, it's headless. Oh no. That time of day, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Pop it on if.
So did yours work, the fast?
So this guy was saying, I'm just putting it on fast just because I want to see it go fast.
Oh really? Yeah.
Some of the kids did that.
I bet some of the kids actually, yeah. But they did what they were told, and then they realised,
They could.
whoa, we need to game this. Yeah, absolutely. So there is this.
Could really have fun.
Some of the whiskers on the front aren't as good as they might be either. They should send it backwards, but... Yeah, they're just little micro switches that just turn it, make the motor run in backwards and then forwards again.
Did you see did it work such that it was break time for all of them and then...
Not at all, no. And I'd really regret not doing... The kids said, can we have just a race? And actually, we didn't. We said, no, life isn't a race. So we got caught up in what we would think they were trying to say, when actually we could have used that. Yeah. So, but I think...
It's interesting to see, 5 robots going up here.
Exactly.
Over here.
Yeah.
Slow with it.
But we've got, these are the first versions, so we will go back and learn from the kids. They'll do what they were told. Exactly. Well, we're done. We're technically done, but.